Hey, so welcome back, everyone. It's our first time back again since last year when we left you just before school finished in June. And so this is Earth Systems that we're going to be talking about today. And then the next one that we have, we'll be meeting in November, and that will be for energy. And then that will be all of the K-3 organizing ideas that we'll be covering for you at this point. You will have them all, and that gives you the better part of the year to kind of unpack the pieces that you want to do and follow through with anything else that we can support you with. So welcome again. My name is Chris Sarsky. I'm one of the consultants for the CARC and NRLC consortia. And I have the distinct pleasure of working with the super best partner of science in the world. And I will get Ted to introduce himself.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. My name is Ted Zeroni. I am one of the consultants with the Edmonton Regional Learning Consortia at the ERLC. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us on this near weekend.
Yes, it is a near weekend, and we're all enjoying the beauty of the fact that it's not snowing outside. So, hey, we're going to take that weekend and celebrate with it for sure. So as we unpack today, we are going to just a quick reminder, especially for those of you who are new to the process with us. If you are new today, then Living Systems and Matter have already been posted to the ARPD website. So you would find those two organizing ideas and any resources that we shared, slide decks, recordings, anything like that will be posted there. And that's what will happen today. Once we are done, we'll take our slide decks, we will put any resources that we have and the recordings, and those will also eventually get posted to the ARPDC site. We will share the recording with you, or sorry, the slide deck with you before you go as a PDF, just so that you have that and aren't being held up for it being posted. But it will eventually be there, and so you'll have access to it from there. When we are doing these sessions, we are providing you with sort of an unpacking of what is entailed within that organizing idea, and hopefully providing you with some guidance of possible resources that you might be able to use, ideas of how you might unpack your own unit in when you're doing your planning, some ideas for maybe for assessment. It's not intended in any way that you would just follow the slide deck from beginning to end, and that would be your unit, because we're going back and forth between surface and deep, talking about pieces that you could use. So again, it'll depend on your style of teaching, how you envisioned that particular unit to be unpacked. Feel free to use whatever is in here that would be helpful to you. And towards the end, we will go in and share with you a sample of the curriculum support document that is available to you already through Living Systems. And then you will see kind of what's coming also for Earth Systems and for Matter and for energy down the road. Okay, so if there's any questions, don't hesitate to jump in the middle. We're pretty lax and relaxed in those kinds of things. And we're a small enough group that we can do that. So feel free to just ask your questions whenever they come up. So when we are doing our acknowledgement, remember that we are a group that are coming from across the province, so we're not specific to a particular treaty. And of course, we know that you will acknowledge your land treaties, but we will do a general acknowledgement, but also on this part of our presentation, also try to link something that you might, for your own personal growth, watch, or something that would be appropriate for you to share with the students as well. They mix and match. Sometimes they're just really targeted for you, the teacher, sometimes very appropriate to take back in the classroom and share with you at the same time. So we will be looking at the honorable harvest, which ties so well into what we're talking about right now in Earth Systems. So we are going to watch that video just to start us off here. It's about a 4-minute video. And then when I come back, I will do the land acknowledgement as well. Oh, okay. Let's go back. Try that again.
If I could choose just a single element.
Sorry, I'm not sure why that's not enlarging, so let's do it again.
Could choose just a single element of the traditional teachings that we're called to pick up, it would be the teachings of the honorable harvest, which were taught us by the plants, who give us everything that we need. It's a covenant of reciprocity between humans and the living world, a very sophisticated ethical protocol. One of the first steps of the Honorable Harvest is to understand that the lives that we are taking are the lives of generous beings, of sovereign beings. And in order to accept their gift, we owe them at least our attention. To care for them, we must know what they need. And at the very minimum, we should know their names. And yet, the average American can name over 100 corporate logos and 10 plants. Is it a surprise that we have accepted a political system that grants personhood to corporations and no status at all for wild rice and redwoods? The protocols for the Honorable Harvest are not really written down, but if they were, it would look something like this. When you get to the woods, you don't just start grabbing everything in sight. We're taught never to take the first plant that you see, and that means you'll never take the last. This is a prescription with inherent conservation value. And then if we encounter another plant, we ask permission. I've always been taught to address that plant, to introduce myself, and tell it what it is that I have come for. If you're going to take a life, you have to be personally accountable for it. I know there are places where if you talk to a plant, they think you are crazy, but in our way, it's just good manners. If you're going to ask, you have to listen for the answer. You can listen in different ways, pragmatically, intuitively. Look around, see whether those plants have enough to share. And if the answer is no, you go home. For we remember that they don't belong to us. And taking without permission is also known as stealing. And the Honorable Harvest counsels that we also take in such a way that does the least harm and in a way that benefits the growth of the plant. Use everything that you take. It's disrespectful of the life that's given to waste it. The next tenet of the Honorable Harvest is to share it with others, human and non. The earth has shared generously with us, so we have to model that behavior in return. And a culture of sharing, we know, is a culture of resilience. Plant gatherers often leave a spiritual gift behind, but it can also be a material gift. Weeding, caretaking, spreading seeds, helping those plants to flourish. We give songs, we give ceremony, we give our respect, we give fertilizer. Every breath that you take is a breath that was made for you by plants. On the water that you drink, whether you're in an urban setting, whether you're on a remote mountaintop, we still are recipients of those gifts. And if we take the time to be grateful, that brings us into that state of humility, of understanding that we are not at the top of a biological hierarchy, that in fact we are the younger brothers of creation.
She does have a very calming voice and a very storytelling voice. It's just a pleasure to always listen to her. In the spirit of reconciliation, we want to acknowledge that this gathering is taking place on traditional lands across the province of Alberta, home to many diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We acknowledge that this land is a traditional meeting ground, giving voice to its original peoples and the story of creation of this country in a way that history has forgotten. So there's lots in that video that we will be touching on today. And I will even reference that video again later on when we start talking about landforms. I would go back and use that video, if nothing else, if to just show children landforms, because it's amazing. Okay, so let's move on. We are going to start a little bit differently. And for those of you who've been with us for a while, and I do see some names here that have been with us all along, we are, and you know already that we kind of change things as we go along. We are going to approach this one sort of with the end in mind. So what is it that what is the goal? What is it that we want students to walk away with in grade 2 or systems? And then let's talk about how are we going to get there? What is it going to look like? What will we do in order to achieve that goal? So to start us off, Ted is going to just begin going through that process, and then we'll look at some resources at the end.
Thanks, Chris. As Chris mentioned, many of you have been with us for some time here, and so I do not want to dwell on this front end stuff. I'm just going to add a couple new thoughts to it, though, just to take a look at things from a different perspective so we can maybe deepen our understanding a little bit more of the curriculum and make the resources and the activities that we choose more intentional. So we're just going to add a layer on to some of the things that we've covered in the past. And one of the things we covered in the past was the notion that this curriculum is a spiraling curriculum. Spiraling in many senses. Number one, we know that within an organizing idea, a certain concept can appear and reappear in different cusp lines. And we know that different concepts and skills appear in different learning, different organizing ideas. For example, we know, the one that comes to mind right now is because we just recently did a session on it is kindergarten, where in matter, senses and the five senses is a huge part in that organizing idea. Yet when we open up Earth systems, senses, it plays an integral role in that one as well. And that's just an example of many of the concepts that revolve around from organizing idea to organizing idea. And then as we go deeper and we're looking at the curriculum more and more, they go from grade to grade. So there's definitely a spiral to this. And I think it's best seen through this little graphic here on the next couple of slides. That in kindergarten, for example, when it comes to Earth systems, the environment is looked at, and as I mentioned, the environment is explored through the senses, and it's the natural world and the man-made items, objects that are explored. By the time we get to grade 1, we add on to that, and we look at the environment in terms of something that changes. Change is brought up in kindergarten, but it's explored a little bit deeper in grade 1, where we took a look at fast change and slow changes. And one of the slow changes is a change in seasons. We also take a look at the environment and responsibility to care for that environment in grade 1. This year, grade 2, we add on to that understanding at that level, and we could take a look at the bottom left-hand corner. Kindergarten and grade 1 have already established that the environment has objects in it, and they have things like land, water, and so on. But we give the name now in grade 2 to those to the Earth's components, and the two components that are being focused on in grade 2, of course, are landforms and water bodies. We also explore that idea of change a little bit more in grade 2. So the environment does experience change, and can experience a fast change, such as change from day and night through the rotation of the Earth, and seasonal change, which is based on the revolution. So although we look at seasons in grade 1, we take a little more at what's because of the revolution that causes that change to occur. And when students get to grade 3, we layer onto that sort of conceptual understanding as well. Again, the focus is on landforms and water bodies, but more about how they change. You can see that when those two lines from landforms and water bodies on the bottom left attached to the lighter green, which is grade 3, which is, again, looking at the Earth's surface, we're looking at how the Earth's surface changes. And again, that's why that green one is connected to the fast change and slow change. So it continues on in that spiraling nature. And as students go from the grades, their conceptual understanding of environment and change and all those other larger concepts come along with it. Next slide, please, Chris. And specifically to this organizing idea, we do take a look, as I mentioned before, at the two of all the components, but focusing on 2 of them, landforms and the different kinds of landforms with it, such as water bodies or mountains and valleys and so on. And that's the dark or the brown colored items. And of course, we look at the water bodies, which are the blue colored items. We take a look at the types of water bodies, including salt and freshwater water bodies. And of course, there is that whole notion that the Earth is in a relationship with the sun, and that's included in this organizing idea. And that relationship creates day and night, and based on a rotation, and of course, seasons based on the revolution. That's a quick look at grade 2 Earth systems. And you've seen this before. The link is there. I'm not going to speak much to it, other than if you want to see where the concepts that you're working with in your grade, where they've come from, maybe where they've been and how they've been developed, you can use this document. The link is on the slide deck that you're going to get right there. You can see the progressions, for example, of how change and how change is used in each of the grades, or environment in this particular case as well. Again, that's there for you if you're considering what students are coming in with and what they're going to really need for the next grade. Just a brief look at skills and procedures again. The next page is one you've seen before. It's going to be the skills and procedures. Go ahead, Chris. The skills and procedures that are are in the primary grade specifically and in the learner outcomes. And I just want to remind people that, again, that it's what the skills are what students do to demonstrate their knowledge and understanding. So that, again, if they're going to be doing it, we want to make sure that students are good at doing it, because we're going to be betting on their doing to show us what they know and understand. So this next slide is just going to show you those key skills that show up in the learner outcomes. In grade 2, we see apply creativity, and I should have looked at that. That's a computer science organizing idea. But when you take a look at creative thinking skills, and maybe I should have thrown some things in here and I didn't. We'll do that in the energy unit. But there's a lot of creative thinking skills that do apply, and we use them all the time. For example, brainstorming. It's something that's so common we forget to use it, and we can use other creative thinking techniques such as Scamper, which do allow for that diverse thinking and creative ideas. Also in grade 2, we look at examine and explain a lot, and investigate and relate. And so we're going to be taking a look at some of those as we move forward too. But those aren't the only verbs that are skills that are important. If you take a look at that left-hand column, there are quite a few there that show up in K-3. Those are not all of the verbs that show up in the skills and procedures. What this is just a reflection or a culmination of the most frequently used skills and words from K-3. The dark colored again represents that skill showing up in specifically in skills and procedure statements. The white means that it's not there, probably isn't touched on very much. The light colored pink ones means that even though it's not mentioned, that skill's not mentioned in a skills and procedure statement for that grade, it's assumed that students will still need to do that and be proficient in that. For example, when it comes to asking questions, specifically in kindergarten skills and procedures, it does show up as ask questions, but it doesn't show up in grade 1, 2, or 3 as skill and procedure. However, when we look further down to what are the steps in the investigation, and we see investigate near the bottom shows up in grade 1, 2, and 3. We have to remember that the first step in an investigation is to ask questions. So many of those are sub-skills that show up, but they're not specifically mentioned. You'll notice I have 2 colors there as well. The 2 colors represent the verbs that definitely show up in for example, this cusp line of the first cusp line in grade 2. So compare is there, compare various landforms to the Earth's surface. But I just wanted to point out that we can also use other skills in that list, because if we were to just use those skills only when they show up in a skills and procedure statement, the likelihood of kids getting proficient at them is going to be minimal, because there might be one or two in an entire course that shows up. So if we want kids to be good at comparing, we have to have them use it as often as possible. If we want kids to be good at observing, it's not listed in this cusp line, but we can get them to observe various landforms on the Earth's surface as well. And they're going to have to do that often if they compare, especially if they're outside and looking at landforms in their real form, or watching a video. Or maybe representing various landforms. Representing is a skill that shows up very many times throughout the science course. And I just want to add one more thing. When you take a look at those, all those skills on the left, just asking questions and classifying, predicting, observing, comparing, concluding, a lot of those skills are skills that are helpful not only in science, but in a lot of the courses we teach. They're highly transferable, and the more opportunities we can get kids to use them, the better. We don't, for example, have kids, we don't usually put analyze as that question for students. We'll do something else to have them do it, but we want to maybe get back to helping them understand what analyzing is and really giving explicit attention to it through the skills. So I think we can feel free to integrate a lot of skills into the cusps as we go along, just for that practice. Okay, so next thing, sorry. And of course, there's the understandings. The understandings are the logical connections of those specific concepts. And I have an example from grade 2 here. We can go to the next slide, Chris. For example, in that first cost plan in grade 2, we've got components of life as one of the concepts, and life. And I liken it to survival from grade 1 living systems. They're sort of a similar thing, but in grade 1, they have taken a look at what is survival. And so when we take a look at how those two ideas might be related, we show that shows up in the understanding, which reads in the next slide as: the earth consists of components that support life or support survival. Yeah, we could maybe interchange that, but we'll use the word life in there. But they do mean a very similar thing. So those are the understandings. They do combine concepts. And again, those are highly transferable as well. So briefly looking at that then on the next slide, we do want to make sure that because it's a spiraling curriculum and those concepts and skills show up from grade to grade and organizing idea to organizing idea, want to make sure that when our teaching approach can help build that transferability of those skills. So when we take a look at even something like a simple concept like a mountain, we know that's highly transferable. We can take a look at all different kinds of mountains and we say, that's a mountain. I know it is because it's got certain attributes that makes it a mountain. And we can give kids all kinds of examples to explore and identify them as. So same with the understandings. They are highly transferable as well. The first understanding in grade 2 is the earth consists of many components that support life. Is that understanding evident in that context? Where the man's drinking water? Is that evident in the next context as well? And it is, since we could find many contexts where those understandings appear. In order to teach for Tantra, you've seen this. Go ahead, Chris. You've seen this graphic before. I'm not going to dwell on it. The only thing I'm going to do is I've added a couple things just to add on to that. That surface learning is where we introduce kids for the first time what the skill is and what the concept is. We define it, we give them a flavor of it, we demonstrate it, we get them to start getting used to it. We deepen their understanding of specific skills, and that's the arrow at the bottom that I landed. We can also deepen kids' understandings of the individual skills by giving them more examples. For example, the picture that I showed, having a variety of pictures will deepen their understanding of the concept. Or sometimes you'll read a story or a poem and say, well, can you see that concept in here? Can you see interaction in what kind of interaction is happening in the story? So we can give kids different contexts to deepen their understanding of those individual skills and concepts. The understanding where we link those three together becomes automatically deep, because that becomes where we link the concepts together and give kids practice to understand the relationship between those 2 or 3 concepts. And then we transfer that as well into new contexts. And I added the arrows on there because we're sometimes going back and forth. Sometimes we have to go back and redo some teaching at the surface level. We thought we could be at deep, but kids may be struggling a little bit, so we'll have to do more practice at the surface level and so on. And same with the transfer and understanding. Before we get to a transfer, which is eventually going to be an assessment of some sort, because we want to give them a new context for them to demonstrate what they know and do. We don't want to give them a context they've already done, because they're going to have it, they'll demonstrate to you by rote memory that I've done good on it. So we want to change the context. That's where the transfer comes in. But we may have to spiral back to deep to make sure that kids are ready to do well in that assessment, which is what Chris referred to as when we talk about the end in mind. So we do want to talk about that, because we're at the point where, when we unpack this curriculum, we're keeping in mind that we're also planning for it in some way. We want to figure out how can I present this to the students. And so relying on the research of Grant and Wiggins and so on, we want to do the backwards planning, where we could take a look at the end is where we should begin. And the end is the learning outcomes and the understanding. So we want kids to really understand at the end of the day, and what's the learning outcome. And when we do assessments for those things, or in a sense, either doing formative assessments, it could be for the understandings, could be some formatives, they could be summative, depending on how big that cusp line is, or they could be fairly large summative assessments for the learning outcome. So that's how we're going to unpack this, because once we know what our assessments are or get an idea, and we're going to model that, we'll know, well, what is it that we have to teach? What do kids have to know to be successful in this summative assessment? So I have an example here. We know that the learning outcome for one of the cusps is, the learning outcome is students investigate Earth, its landforms, its bodies of water, and its relationships to the sun. So we got that word investigate there, and we can make one assessment that might assess all of that, but we can also break it down into pieces. Now, I've got landforms highlighted there. I should have water bodies, because my possible assessment on the last is that I'm going to have kids investigate 4 different water bodies to determine how similar and different they are. And we're going to go through an example of how I could do that, when we compare and contrast, we can actually have kids go through that investigation process, which we'll unpack a little bit later. So to do that assignment, though, if you go to the right, what will kids need to know? Well, they're going to need to compare and contrast. They need to know similarity and difference. They need that surface level understanding of the different landforms. When we compare and contrast, criteria becomes really important. So they're going to maybe need to know what criteria are, because we're going to choose criteria to compare and contrast things. And we'll share those with you shortly. And of course, they're going to need to know what the steps are in investigation. And in grade 2, when you look at scientific methods, there are 7 steps in an investigation. So what will they have to do? They're going to need to investigate. They need to compare and contrast. And in this particular one, the way I have it designed, they need to research. They have to look at something, at different information, so that they can learn about those landforms a little bit deeper. And then they're going to have to compare and contrast and go through the steps of investigation. And also, I've got an example of how that might be impact as well. So that's what we need about the end in mind. What's the assessment going to do to be successful at that? They're going to need to know and do certain things. They're not all going to be taught in this one. It's like there's a strong likelihood that kids may be already coming into this, because this could be if this is the second organizing idea, many of these things might have been taught, but you want to make sure that they have been, so that they are successful on the sum or in the assessment. Sorry, I got long-winded on that. Next slide, Chris.
And I was just going to add into that one too, that what Ted has just described here, we also are going to hit multiple understandings, because part of those pieces that we are also unfolding with the students is that they have to be able to demonstrate an understanding of what these bodies of water, these mountains, these landforms are in Alberta. So, and what is some World Heritage sites that exist within Alberta. So part of that investigation could be tying all of those pieces together into one. It's not having to do them separately. So we can really let them dive into areas that maybe they visited one, maybe one's completely new to them, or maybe they don't know any of those, and it gives them a chance to start in on that. So, okay, I'll just.
No, that's perfectly. No, thanks, Chris. And that makes us, I just narrowed it down for one, just so that it didn't get a big long list of things to know and do. But that would be a great unit, or I guess unit end, or organizing idea end assessment. But we can also, when we talk about the end in mind, we can also take a look at the understanding, say, well, how am I going to get kids to understand that? And quite often, something will be in the skills and procedure that can help. Not all the time, but in this particular case, there is. For example, there's a skills and procedure statement that says, discuss how the various components of Earth interact to support life. That's a fairly big assessment. That's a fairly big thing to do, because kids obviously, if you go to the next slide, Chris, or they need to be successful at that, where they're going to have to know more than just what those components are. They're going to need to know what an interaction is. And how do we unpack that at grade 2? What's an interaction? And there's a strong likelihood that having students come up with all the possible interactions is well beyond what they should be at in grade 2. So in order to do that, though, what we want to do is give them an opportunity to discuss things, so they can use some of the words in a discussion, and we can see how they get along to see when they can talk about the interaction. So we're discussing how they're doing, but we want to make sure we're talking about, when they talk about the interactions, that they demonstrate an understanding of the components, the 4 components there. And there's an example that we'll share with you a little bit later on, see how you can impact that whole thing, where they can discuss and understand that concept of interaction as well when they do that. Next slide, Chris. So if we were to take a look at even just those 2 assessments that I have planned, you'd see that they're at the surface level. I'm going to do some pre-testing to make sure, do they understand what investigation is? Have they done anything with researching before I dive into this unit? Have they done any comparing? And maybe concept mapping may come in handy, because there's some assessments or some activities you can do with concept mapping. They need to know a lot of concepts. There's a lot of concepts related with landforms. There's all types of landforms related that are basically very specific concepts. Mountain is a concept, but there's all kinds of different mountains for sure. There's all kinds of different water bodies as well, and rivers. So those are all things that need to be covered at the surface level before we start making these connections and doing these things. And they can happen, they don't have to happen all the front end. We don't have to teach everything at the front end, the surface level. We just want to know that before we're going to introduce it and have students do something specific with it, we're going to want to make sure that we've got our bases covered so that they have a good surface level understanding of it. And so we're going to share some surface level activities. In the next slide, we'll show you all kinds of things we can do. But before we do that, Chris is going to take you to some of those concepts that kids should be coming into this grade 2 program organizing idea with.
Right. So in a perfect world, if the new curriculum had been already delivered and children have already gone through kindergarten and grade 1 in the new program, arriving at your doorstep in grade 2, they would have had things like senses well embedded in their learning and their vocabulary. They would have had other pieces about living systems already done. So there may be a need to do a little quick of a pre-assessment to find out where exactly are my kids at? What are they coming into the classroom with? What do they already know? And maybe where do I need to pause before I really jump into grade 2 and pick up some of the key concepts? So in each of the slide decks that we have shared with you, we're doing the same thing. We always go back and pick up, because of you're launching in at a starting point that's not necessarily the beginning point for the children. What are some of the key concepts that happened previous to this? And those slides, we've included them in your slide deck here, not the whole thing. And certainly if you see something or you feel after you've talked with students that you need more, you have access to every grade. You would know which system to go and get it from or which organizing idea. So it would be important to sort of figure out what do they know? And the students would have already done in kindergarten and grade 1, they would already have a good working knowledge of things like living and non-living. They would have done lots of card sorts between living and non-living. They would have done lots of sorting in living itself and really breaking down different components of living. And then in that discussion of living and breaking up all the different aspects that we can look at, what are the characteristics of living things, we also talk about the basic needs of anything that's alive, which touches right into what they're doing here. So those are the kinds of pieces that we would want to make sure students are well versed in. And if not, maybe we take a little bit of a trip down, maybe go grab a couple of the videos that are already given in living systems. And you could just start with that and have a discussion that could definitely flow into grade 2, but just so that we have the vocabulary and the background knowledge embedded with the students before we launch into some of the discussions that we want to do in grade 2. Also environments. As Ted mentioned, students have done work in environments. They've defined what an environment is. They know what the characteristics of an environment is. So that'll be important for us to make sure, do they know before I get going here? If I'm going to talk about what are the Earth's components that are really important, we're also talking about different environments that those components are going to be in, and how do I tell them apart, and all the different areas of landforms that are going to have. So do students know in your class what an environment is? And maybe do we need to spend a little bit of time? So to unpack environment with the students, we were doing things like, and these are slides from their particular learning opportunities. What do you notice? What do you wonder? That was part of the curriculum, is what is a wonder? What is a notice? How do we tell them apart? How do I use that language with the students? So at the bottom of the pictures, you'll even see they were working with a partner, and we suggested that they would finish the sentence, we wonder what? What did you look at this picture and wonder about? So you could even take some of these pictures if you're talking about landforms and have those as part of your discussion, but also, do they understand the differences in the environments? We've talked about natural living and natural and unnatural. So what is man-made and what is natural? So this is a component of a picture that shows all natural things. So again, it's just using a little bit of what's already been done to see whether or not they picked up on those, and do they know that language and that terminology surrounding it. Here again is a mix where we have natural. We also have unnatural. We didn't show them the picture to distinguish between that. We just showed them the picture to give us their wonder first. Then we come back to the same picture and ask them, Are there natural and unnatural in here or man-made in here? So we can multi-purpose these pictures again to use them for a variety of different scenarios. Same thing with the playground. So what is your wonder? What do you notice? And later bring back the same picture and ask them in terms of what is natural, what is man-made. So are they picking up on those? Are they understanding those components? So we ask the students after doing the work with the pictures, how would you describe to somebody in the class what is an environment? What was the language that they would use? What are the words that they would use to describe it? So that would be a good starting point to find out where the grade 2s are at. And then objects, properties, in this case, what are some objects that are the same and different in these environments? Students have done in matter, objects, and properties. Big words. Those are big concepts that live through all the way to grade 6. Like they are rocks that have started in early years and they continue to build. So those are words that we would want them to make sure that they've learned as well. If they haven't done matter yet, then maybe we need to do a little bit of that work and just see where they're at. In any case, there was a bit of a video, or sorry, a poster that we provided that could help to sort of unpack the notion of an environment. What are the things I see in an environment, and what do I see that's natural and man-made? So again, just a bit of a reference point, if nothing else. It could be a conversation point for you if you're just trying to find out what they know and what they don't know. So from defining environments, would they then move to how do you explore an environment? So as Ted mentions, senses come up here in a big way. In Earth systems, we're going to use our senses again. We use the senses to explore the environment. How do I describe the environment? What am I using? Which sense am I using to describe it? What is it telling me? How am I able to just give you descriptive words using my senses of the environment that I'm in or that I'm supposed to be describing to you? So we gave them the senses pictures. We give them a card sort that's different than the one they had before. And we asked them, can you put the cards down with the sense that would be used to explore or to explain or to describe that particular picture that you're seeing on your card? And students were fairly quick to say, I have some cards, even in kindergarten when they did their first sorts. They said, I think it should go with more than one picture though, but I only have one card. And so that's really intuitive for some children to pick up that, maybe it was sight and smell that a particular card could have gone into, and they're questioning, where do I put it? So we said, well, you could put it in the middle. And that could indicate that it's going to go into both of those, which is really, if you think about it quickly, when I'm looking at assessment practices, that's a great Venn diagram that you've just created. You have the circle of sight, the circle of smell, and what was in between is what the students recognized both senses could be used for that picture. And so kindergarten students very able to handle Venn diagrams, and in grade 2, those are really powerful ways to do assessment because it requires me as a student to demonstrate that I know quite a bit about a number of things that I can make comparisons and similarities and contrasts, those types of things. So how we explore, what are some words that we would use? So that would be using your senses. We also talked about finding objects on their own. So stepping out of the box now, instead of me giving you, you go find. So find objects, find things that would use one sense, find things that would use two, find one that has 5. 5 is easy, 1 is almost impossible. So we give them those challenges of things that they can do. We gave them pictures. If they didn't have the opportunity to go outside, or they are in an environment where they wouldn't be able to go and explore, or you've already used all of the areas around you as your examples, so then we provide pictures as well. So going to a farmer's market, what senses would you use going to a farmer's market? Not every child knows what a farmer's market is, right? So again, there's multiple pictures. Hopefully one of them resonates with students. What if they go tobogganing or they go sleigh riding? What senses are they using? What are they describing? What are they learning about their environment? So all of those different pieces, hopefully one of these pictures resonates with a child where they'd be able to do that work with you. Do you have children in your class who play soccer? If not soccer, is it baseball? Is it not baseball? What sports do they have? You could replace the picture with anything. And again, what are we looking at here? What's the environment? What's the natural part of the environment? What's the man-made part of the environment? What are the senses that I'm using? So each picture has multiple opportunities, and that's what we're hoping for even in the work that we're going to do with our systems, is you're not really labeling it to just one cusp that you're working on. You're going to be able to draw in elements of all of them, which makes your assessment that much richer and really allows the students to generate the thinking that they have and explain to you what they've learned and know and don't know. Seasons, if the students aren't versed in what seasons are, then again, we might want to do a little bit of work on that, because the seasons, the work that's actually in here talks about the sun, the night, the day, the seasons, the length of the year, the shorter the days. They get into things like migration. How do animals know that they should just start flying? Because they're already using their senses in order to figure out that days are getting cooler, days are getting shorter. That's their trigger to know that they would be migrating, for example. So again, those videos are available.
Today, we will learn
maybe a picture. Can they describe which picture belongs to which season? Very surface level if you're just starting to learn it. But if I'm supposed to already know it, do I know it? You know, just which one and what's your indicator? Can you explain to me how you know? How did you know that the one here is spring, or how do you know that this one is summer? What are you looking at as your indicator? So again, it just digs a little deeper for us to know exactly where they're at and what it is they're going to do. There's a number of different types of instructional strategies that we could use to unpack some of that surface level knowledge. If I have lots of terminology or lots of sort of right and wrong things I need to teach first, before I start to get into the actual integration and relationship between those concepts, what are some ways that I can do that? Is it the same format every day, or can I give them the same intent, but perhaps do it in a slightly different way? So using a card sort that we talked about, using a Freyer model, using a concept attainment strategies, and TED has lots of those created already that are already embedded within the slide decks. And so if you're looking for some of those, especially if you're backtracking, have a look at some of those and use those. Those are slide decks with all of the pictures already put in there so that I can create the environment of learning that concept through the concept attainment. So a lot of different strategies, and they're not meant to say that what we're doing is wrong or anything like that. They're just saying, what else could you add into the toolbox that might help based on your style of teaching, based on the things that you are looking for, based on what you're hoping for them to say to you? What's another approach that you might be able to use? Ted, do you want to talk about these? Oh, you're muted.
I'll get it right one of these days, Chris.
No worries.
With this is just a list of the different surface level activities that you may want to use. You wouldn't have to use depending where your kids are, but they are things that for students to be successful, perhaps in this organizing idea and some of the activities that and the assessments that we had planned, these would be some things they would need to know. The first few things are very much knowledge based from the specifically with this organizing idea, such as the Earth's components, landforms, water bodies, and the idea of rotation and revolution. See, those are all links there to the slides, and Chris will be covering those shortly here. And so those would be a lot of surface level activities. Just what are they? If your students are new to comparing, well, these would be some surface level activities for what is comparing, contrasting. What's a practice I can give my students? How would I organize that before they compare and contrast? We know we're asking to look for similarities and differences. So what are those? When you compare or when you do a lot of things, as a matter of fact, the word criteria shows up in the competencies for grades 1 to 3 under decision making, that students in Division 1 make decisions based on criteria. But that's not the only thing we use criteria for. We use criteria for comparing and contrasting. We do it for evaluating. In a sense, we do it for analyzing. We'll get into that right now, but it's a very really very useful term that comes into play, and it's a fairly easy concept for kids to understand. And a lot of these that, as Chris mentioned, are the concept attainment activities, and they will be there for you to use, because many of them use images as well as words. So if you have some non-readers still, you could still do some things with them. We also know, as I mentioned when I gave the assessment, here's the sum of the assessment, here's what we need to know. Well, we need to know if that it's going to include them doing an investigation. So there's a surface level activity right there with investigation to really unpack it, to help you identify what it means. What is an investigation at grade 2? There's 7 steps. I don't know if you want to open that now, Chris, or not. We don't have to. But then within those 7 steps are the asking questions, observing, analyzing, prediction, making predictions, and so on. Those are just some activities. If those are new to your kids, you can use them. So this activity kind of just has all the links there. You could see the steps there in grade 2 computer science, and in grade 2 computer science lays the foundations for grade 3, 4, and so on. Students in grade 6 use these same skill or same steps. So we're first being introduced to those in grade 2. So this curriculum breaks down how to maybe do that. Activity 1 might be, if you just scroll down, Chris, might as well, you're there. Yep. You will just show again, you want to make sure the kids are familiar with these things, what are, good asking questions and wondering and making predictions and so on. So I want to point out an analyzing and analysis. It sounds like a big word, but something kids do naturally. We all do it. We know that with kindergarten kids, even when younger, kids can analyze things. We ask kids to sort things by shape. Well, they're looking at it, they're breaking it apart, looking at shapes, looking at things. If we give them things to sort without even giving them anything, they're going to analyze it and find some qualities about those things to sort them. So an analyze is simply breaking the thing down to its parts and examining it. And an analysis means that you're breaking it down and come to some kind of conclusion. Well, what does it all mean? So you're breaking it apart, looking at it, and then coming up with a conclusion. So what is a conclusion? And there are some I think, grade appropriate examples of how to introduce those to kids. And then the rest of the activity says, well, how can we go through it? And then we go through some examples. You can just give kids a fun activity like, what do you think the favorite color in the class is? Well, how are we going to figure that out? You can see how you can go through each of those stages of predicting it, of gathering the data, and then analyzing the data and making a conclusion and so on. So that's all there to help you unpack investigation if you wanted to use
and
this.
Just as an FYI, when you see this blue tab in the top right-hand corner, if you're not familiar with that, those will be coming up a little bit more often in some of the things that we're posting. So these are designed so that if you want just to preview stuff that's been posted by anybody, what we're doing is doing it this way so that you can open the document, look at it, and then if you say, oh yeah, you know what, I really want that one, if you click on the blue button, what it will do is automatically download it to your computer in an editable form. Because that was the other thing, is we were hoping that whatever we start posting for you, it would give you, the teacher, a chance to get in there and add in or take out or move things around if that suits your needs better. So that's how you treat those, because they will come up again and you will see them again.
You can see my activity 3. I'll fix that. For grade 1, I haven't changed it. I was copying and pasting. So I'll change that step for you. Okay. And so that's what all this, I've included stuff with the relationship in there because, again, the idea with interaction, you can see that shows up at the bottom sort of sub bullet there, shows up quite a bit. It shows up in grade 1 in the learning outcome for grade 1. Kids look at interactions. And so understanding that is good to be, not only shows up in this skills procedure statement, in this organizing idea, but it's going to show up in other organizing ideas. And the more you can get kids to open up and start working and understanding these things, the easier it's going to be in all the other organizing ideas, because it's going to pop up. Cause and effect, interactions are going to pop up. And they're all basically based on the idea of what is a relationship. And a concept map is just a graphic organizer of that. So all those there are just examples of how to introduce those to your students. And again, most of them are using words and graphics to help the non-readers out as well. And then we're going to get into research at slide 65. So these are things that, at some point along the way, if we know we're going to get kids to use these things, we're going to want to introduce them before we really start getting to muck around with the content, because we don't want the content to be distracted from them learning an idea or a skill. Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's good. And I was going to say, one of the examples I've been using as I move around from school to school is identify. So if I want you to learn how to identify is in my curriculum, but if I'm doing as Ted said, I want to teach it to them outside of science first, so that when they do it in science, they already know what the meaning is. Could be as simple as, okay, it's lunchtime. Everybody take out their lunch kit, bag, whatever they have. let's say empty it on the table. Let's see if we can identify. Let's see if we can see. Let's see if we can locate. Let's see if we can find whether or not you have a healthy snack or a healthy food in your lunch today. So they just learn the term identify outside of science. We get it in our heads. Then when they come back to science and do identify with me, I can focus on the concept of science that I want them to learn, not on identify at the same time. So that's a kind of an important piece that helps the kids sort of, and we do that kind of stuff in every subject. It's not like it's specific to science.
Chris,
So,
before
yes.
you go on then, if you don't mind, I'm going to have you go back one slide. I'm just going to look at the time just again to exemplify what Chris was saying a little bit more either. If you could go back to that slide and that Earth's components, can you just click on that really quickly?
This one?
The very top link on that slide deck. No, go back one.
Oh, this one here.
Go back to that previous slide deck.
Yep, Earth components.
Right. Because I think what you have there and what's here can work in conjunction. So that you click on the Earth's components at the very top.
Yep.
Oh, there we go. So that's an activity that will take to introducing kids to those components. But it begins by looking at, again, teaching what an interaction is. And if you could scroll down a little bit. Exactly. And if you open up that where it says step 1. I can just go back a little bit, one more step. There's 3 activities built within there.
Oh, right.
Scroll back more to the top.
Okay.
The slide deck there, it says Earth components and interactions. So all the activities takes you to this little bit of a slide deck where you can examine the interactions between the different components. And if you just quickly scroll through it, it just breaks the components down from the layer. We've got the air, and then that they support life and that they interact. And then we get the kids to look at, well, how does land affect air? Because an interaction is one thing affecting the other thing. So it goes through how does land affect air, and then how does all these fit together? It's a big task, but there's different ways to do it within this activity. If you keep on, go to the next slides, then there's some example interactions that you could discuss with the kids when you get down to the end of this activity. A couple more clicks and you'll start getting into so they're filled in. So you can have kids do it individually. You could just show this with the group and discuss it. But what you're going to get is you're going to get a discussion happening when kids are talking about this, and you're going to hear a lot of misconceptions about what they think the interaction is, what effect plants and animals have on the air or on the water or on the humans, or what effect humans have on plants and animals. So it's just a glimpse. And it's not really, when you look at it, it's not really, the interactive part's not a big part of this organizing idea. But it's in that skills and procedures one, so I thought I'd better address it. But it's a really good one for really uncovering misconceptions. So I just wanted to point that out to you if you want to do that, because there's some things that I think that might be able to start a good discussion with your little ones.
And this is where that list, I know it looks daunting, but you just saw sort of an example of what's sitting behind one of those clicks. Like there's a lot of stuff that's been done for you. So just taking the time to go through and finding what's there, because as Ted said, not all of these are just about this unit grade 2 Earth systems. You could use those in other areas as well.
Yeah. Concepts transfer.
Absolutely, that's for sure. So in Earth systems, again, these are graphics that you can use, but we want to be able to talk about for students. This would be a sort of a follow-up to that basic needs already understanding, but now we're talking about it in terms of components of the Earth. So the Earth, air, water, land, and life. And we're going to unpack each of those. More specifically, unpacking the land. The land forms is really the piece that they're going to spend a bit more time on now in grade 2. And we also talk about in that opening understanding is that at the moment, and research says that Earth is the only planet that has life. So when you click on this video, there's a great way to have that conversation afterwards about, it just talks about what is it that Earth has that the other planets don't have? What is it that why is it that Earth is even entitled to have that? Because it lives in a certain zone. What's that zone called? So it unpacks it in a really interesting way for the students, very appropriate for grade 2. And then also that sort of that notion of day and night. This is not completely new to them. Again, when we talk about that, we do touch on that in the seasons as well. But that's a video that you could use either as your introductory, a case study meaning I'm going to show that first and then discuss and unpack it, or I could unpack it first and then use that as support. So in that case, not a case study. So lots of different ways to approach this. You can just change it up.
Where you live now?
Sorry, those always start. Looking at landforms is a huge component of what they're doing in grade 2. So they're asking them to really explore, and I almost want to say it's like get to know Alberta is really what grade 2s are doing. They're getting to learn about Alberta. They're learning about the heritage sites of Alberta, what makes them special. They're learning about the landforms in Alberta. Some of our children travel a lot, so they have seen a prairie, they've seen a mountain, they've seen a hill, they've seen a canyon, and some of our children have never traveled, so they will only see that environment that they're used to seeing. So that's a really important piece. Yes, we will be sharing all of that stuff. So in this one, you might want them just to go through and first of all, label or write down the landforms that are shown in the opening picture. And then what are they learning as they're watching this video? What are they learning? Rather than getting words from us, what words are they going to write down to explain the different landforms that they see? And eventually we also, this is very surface level, because I want them to learn about different kinds of landforms. Not all of them are in this video, so you might want to supplement some of them as well.
Hello,
But we also want them to go through and really be intentional about learning that Alberta is a very diverse province that has very unique landforms. So depending on where I go, I may see some things that are very, very different. And again, we've also picked some of the ones, I titled them as UNESCO. So in your outcomes, and this is where I'm pulling all of them together at the same time, they're asking students to find different landforms. And then later on, they say, now that you found some different landforms, why don't you explore some that have been labeled by UNESCO? Okay, what does that mean? And where are they? I've never been there. So students could take one that they've known already and maybe one they don't, or maybe pick two they're completely new to them. If they've never seen a mountain, maybe they want to talk about Edith Cavell. Maybe they want to do a research piece in there. Again, now it becomes your competencies of how am I going to share my learning with you? Am I going to do a presentation? Am I going to do an infographic? Am I going to, like, what are you comfortable with? What are you letting them choose from? Having student choice and voice will just engage them even more. So it isn't just about learning the landform, it's about maybe combining that with a number of different sites that they've never seen before. Okay, so we've got Drumheller on here, but I did create a number of different sites for you to go to. We'll show you that in just a second. But when we're talking about landforms, we are talking about, there are some characteristics that are common of words that we would use in defining a landform. So what are the characteristics of a landform? That it has a certain slope perhaps to it. If I'm talking about the prairies, a pretty minimal slope, if anything. If I'm talking about a mountain, it could be a very steep slope. So talking about what does it mean about a slope? What is a slope, first of all? And then how do I identify it, right? And then they have that language that they can use for comparative analysis. What about the size of it? Mountains can be very big. Little hills can maybe not be so big, right? So do I have terminology and comparative language that I can use for comparison there? Do I have something I can use to compare? And then also terrain. What is the terrain? Is it fairly smooth looking as in a prairie? Is it quite rough looking as the edges and jagged parts of a mountain? Not every mountain looks rough either. Some of them look quite smooth depending on what kind of mountain it is, where it's located, how it got created, all of those different pieces. So those three key characteristics, we want students to be able to use those and apply the language in their comparison of different landforms. So water is the other part of this landform that we're talking about. Water is sometimes created and housed in different landforms. So when I have deep valleys, I typically have water in those valleys because it can collect there. It can also be runoff from the mountains. What is that kind of water? Well, that could be a small stream that eventually comes into a river, but it's coming down and it's working its way. So students have to start thinking about water isn't just a lake. Maybe that's all they've ever seen. And again, if they've never seen mountains, And they may not have any concept of water melting and coming down of a mountain. They might have heard of it, but I don't really know what that means because I've never actually experienced it. And my husband and I took kids camping every year for 10 years. We would take grade 10 high school students camping for 4 nights. We always took them to the mountains in backcountry camping. And I will be honest with you, it was always breathtaking for him and I as we would take the bus over the rise. And the very first time that this blanket, especially in Kananaskis country, it can hit you right in the face, would hit the students and they would see a mountain. It was stunning to listen to these young adults who've never seen a mountain, what their reaction was. So it isn't that we can assume that children just have a natural vision because they've seen a picture. So wherever we can make it real, if you can take a virtual field trip to a mountain, that would be another way to go, and just make it real for them. So water is the other piece that's built into here, and water can be collected because of the landform that it's around. Water can also be collected because of a landform like a glacier sitting there. Glacier is a form of water. How did a glacier form? What is a glacier if I've never seen it? So there are some videos that I've included in here just to help with that surface knowledge first, to start unpacking pieces. When we talk about water in Alberta, these would be the ones that we would be most likely to have them work on. I'm not saying that's the only thing, but if, again, they're supposed to concentrate on Alberta and really get to know it, glaciers, lakes, wetlands, that's a big one, and rivers. And again, depending on where they live, they may see more of one and less of another. So this is an info page for you, again, where you can get some information and or watch a video and or have students do some research. But what are lakes? How are lakes formed? Are lakes, what kind of water is in a lake? Sometimes they call it a swamp. What's the difference between a swamp and a lake, etc.? Again, it depends on where you're at. If you live in a farming community, children will have a better idea about a swamp or a wetlands than a child who lives in a city and has never left the city. So your environment in itself will help you to unpack some of these easily, and other ones will be a challenge because they've never seen them. How does a river get formed? Like, again, if I don't know anything about water and ice in a mountain, what do I know about a river? All I know is it's there. I live in Edmonton. Okay, I know that there's the North Saskatchewan. It's there. It runs through the city. But did I really ever think about where it came from and how it came to be? So this is an interactive one. I won't go into it now, but when you hit this, it goes through and it shows them how water flows, how the water melts, it comes down. So it gives them a little bit of a picture of that. So again, something to use with the students for surface level information. And then we also talk a little bit about the cycles that occur. Like, what about the water cycle itself that starts? Now, they get into the water cycle very deeply in grade 3, not so much here, but it is part of it, that water evaporates. We have rain that comes down. What happens when rain hits a mountain? It starts to collect and it starts to make those little streams that are coming down pretty busy and pretty full, and that dumps into the river. And so for people who are, if anybody you're around in Calgary, you had those scenarios where the water came down from a heat wave from the mountains in a rush, and you had that total flood that came through of the water, which absolutely changed even the way that the river goes through and around in Calgary. It changed the riverbed. So those are the power that water has. So those are all kinds of things, depending on where you live, that you can bring forward. So these are just lots of slides right now that I'm sharing with you that would be surface level and or that maybe you could give them for further investigation. So understanding the Earth's rotation revolution, you've got some videos here. We've also got some that integrate, oh, this is a great one too, the experiment, right, for the revolution of the Earth. They're going to see this again, but they don't see it until grade 4 where they do space. This is when this comes back again in a big way for them. So again, these are opportunities for us to go in and have a look. But now I also have the understanding Earth revolves around the sun. That's what I have to, that's my understanding that I'm trying to get to. So again, you've got some questions. Why is my shadow shorter, sometimes longer than others, different times of the day? Sunlight on a national mall. I would also look at a sundial, right? How does the sundial change over the day? What does it look like as the sun's moving around? Why is that happening? So that's another one. So bringing out a little bit of that old shadow pieces that we had is another way that we can talk about some of those pieces. Why do our shadows change in length in different seasons, right? That's another piece that we have. So lots of information for you to start with. It's just how you are unpacking your unit in your mind. Will have to glean some of the resources that are available and maybe perhaps others that come out later. Okay, Ted, do you want to talk about the understandings?
Yeah, this one, the understandings in this one is, when you take a look at them carefully, they're very fact-based. They're not really linking a lot of concepts. Like the surface, we look at that third understanding. The Earth's surface is mostly covered by bodies of water. That's the understanding. And it's almost really just a fact. So the understandings are really, really basic, almost factual. So given that, what we want to do then is we're working at the deeper levels. That's where we could start bringing in again some of those skills and having kids do something with that knowledge. And so that's what the deep level activities will have here. One of the things, and this is the comparative investigation, a big word, but that's what I had for that assessment when I said start with the end in mind. Let's compare water bodies. That's really, and I linked it to investigation because the learning outcome said investigate landforms and investigate water bodies. So this might be one way to compare things, but put it into the whole progression of investigation. We know that the steps are asking questions. So the question might be, how similar or different are the mountains, hills, and plateaus and prairies, or whatever landforms you are, or whatever you want, if you want to choose water bodies. Let's make a prediction. How big are they? And the prediction is going to be based on what they already know about those, of course. And then when you plan the planning investigation, likely going to be a research piece. So the planning might be, well, let's get this video, let's get that book, we're going to read that, and so on. Because the investigation with this, unless you're going outside and actually observing, is likely going to be research. So that's what I have now with the observing and recording data. We're basically going to do some research to get it. What I've done was I've included a sample introduction to research. It's a grade 3 example, but I think the steps can be used at grade 2 as well, because you don't want to give them to this right now and just sort of do it, because they're going to need some practice researching, just some simple things to practice learning how to look at things, you'll see that there's a research data collection sheet, and maybe how do you collect information when you just read something or saw something, how do we pick that out? So that's there, all that stuff in the pink box are just some examples to help you out. The data research collection sheet and the rubric are based on the competencies. We can go back to Alberta Ed, the competencies that were presented several years ago on that research piece of research and managing information. That's what I'm using, is that the information from there for grades 1 to 3 to say, what do kids in grade 1, 2, and 3 need to do with research? So if you want to click on maybe go to the single point rubric for researching, they have the criteria there, and they're basically, what I did was basically pulled out what is on the competencies for grades 1 to 3, that they collect information for a specific reason or a purpose. I can combine information from a lot of sources. So maybe they'll be watching 2 videos, and this video has something about this landform, and this has about that landform. I determine the content of information to use. There's some videos that are embedded in here, some links that have more information than what they need. So what am I going to choose? What is my real question? What do I want to do? And then referencing the source. And that's what the data collection sheet is. If you click out of there, Chris, the data collection sheet on there, is basically, again, uses hopefully a fairly simple thing. And maybe you have to simplify more for grade 2. I'm not too sure. But why am I doing this? We could put the research question, right? I want to find out how similar or different things are. I want to compare things. Will be my audience, maybe my classmates and my teacher. And then a fairly simple thing, just the title, and then circle, is it a video, book, magazine, or something else? And just the title of it. I'm not too want to expand it. Maybe they're ready to put the URL on it or things like that. I'm not too sure. I suspect if it's going to be a video, it's going to be teacher supplied already anyways. So that might be getting in the way of just making sure what we really want kids to do at this point is we want them to be able to just keep track of where they're getting the information from and what they got from that piece of information on a very simplistic level. So again, you're not going to throw this to them right in the smack dab middle before you then say, and then have them compare landforms as your practice piece. You want to give them something that's just going to have them focus on the steps, not so much the content, because you really want to help them out to get a dry run first before you use research for them to demonstrate what they can know and do. And so if we're going to do a comparative piece compare the various landforms on the Earth's surface, one of the things for collecting data as well could be this as well, because they're going to be getting it, and you can see the characteristics that Chris pointed out earlier. I said that becomes your criteria. So we could talk about, again, what's going to be some criteria when we compare a mountain and a hill? What can we use? Well, we could use their characteristics as criteria. You may use location. You can use a bunch of criteria, but that's something that, if your kids understand what the IDEA criteria is, that column will make a lot more sense to them. And then, of course, at the end of the day, you're going to have students are going to decide whether they're similar or different based on those criteria. And then their conclusion is going to be, yeah, these things are really different, or they're somewhat different, or something. So that's where the conclusion piece comes in. And this helps them to analyze the data in that step of the investigation. So go ahead, Chris. I think you've got the rest of this information to cover for this one. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you are going through this now, if you're looking for where they're going to get this info, just kind of have taken some of those key sites that are around Alberta here, and some of them that were mentioned in the curriculum document, and some of them that weren't. And then you could just share or divide them out, or let kids choose and start. There we go. So we've got everything from the prairies all the way down into the mountain areas. Again, all of these are going to start on me. So
Hello.
that's the problem with them having LinkedIn here. Some of them were not mentioned in there, but I didn't notice that we didn't have any canyons in there. So I put Moline Canyon in there from Jasper. You could put Johnson's Canyon in there from Banff. Like, there's lots of canyons that they could, but that's a good one for them to see. Some children might say, yeah, I've been there before. Great. Now we have a little bit of a conversation that we can have. So there's lots of possibilities in here. Also included Spirit Island from Moline Lake, and that would also give you an Indigenous culture perspective that you'd be able to tie into this as well. But Head Smash.
Okay, we have our first official.
Head Smash and Buffalo Jump would be another one that's in here and gives us an opportunity to do that. So there's lots of different places, included glaciers in there if they've never seen a glacier. So hopefully children would find, at least two that they could start to compare. I don't think at grade 2 it would be inappropriate to let them have one that they're somewhat familiar with, and then maybe one that they are very new to, that they have a good grounding for comparison. And then we have a card sort. Not a card sort, sorry. Cards that we could sit down and have students now create a concept web, much like Ted showed you at the very beginning. That's one sample of a concept web. How would the kids do that? So if we did this on a whiteboard, if we did this on a floor, a large piece of paper, where they could move the cards around, they could put their own arrows in there. How would they put these together? And again, there's not one right way to do this based on what they've learned. But this is also a great assessment piece that we can do to see what the student's understanding is at this point. Okay, and for some reason, there we are. So it could look like this. It could look different. The more important part will be their explanation for why did they put things together that they did, right? What are they thinking? What was their reasoning for it? How are they using terminology and language for it? And then our last one, transfer and assessment. But I will also say to you that the one that we just showed you, depending on what you did at the beginning and as you're unpacking the surface stuff and moving into deep, the one that Ted just showed you that he'd already outlined, that would be another one that could be transferred as a transfer one, right? So you have to kind of weigh out where you're at and what the students have already seen. So I could create a model or investigate a site. So pick one of those 4 pages of sites and describe the relationship between the landform and water in their choice. could do the one that we just showed you that was a deep, that could be a transfer one. So again, you need to kind of weigh out where you're at with those and make some decisions. Okay, and steering. We have, and we will fix this before, we'll put it in right now if we have time while I'm talking. Ange Deering has the computing science. She's our consultant who comes in, and what she will do is create for you a lesson that you could use for grade 2 Earth systems in computing science. So what does it look like in grade 2 Earth science? So she'll give you a 10 or 15-minute video with a slide deck, with an activity. You are welcome to use her slide deck. You're welcome to use your activity or get ideas from it and change it out. But the whole idea was just to try and help sort of calm the waters. There's lots of people a little bit concerned about this computing science, thinking that it's more about programming robots, and that's not it at all. So she's just coming in and creating a lesson specific to your grade and your organizing idea. So we're going to, because we're going to share this out with you, we'll see if we can get that put up right away here. There are some resources, additional ones that you might want to use at the end of the video. So again, what's water? Why the air that we breathe? So these are just stop points. The one that's at the bottom here, I want to point this one out to you. We have used that in almost all the organizing ideas, more so in the older grades, but it isn't just about the older grades. And if you are looking for the Indigenous perspective and trying to weigh in on how does that fit with landforms, how does that fit with the importance of water, Sacred Relationships is an entire series of videos and or unit lessons. Now, they were written for grade 5 and 6, but that's not the important part of it. It talks about wetlands. It talks about water and why is water so important. And that is part of your curriculum, is to have the Indigenous perspective. The elders talk to the students about what water is. They talk to them about why they offer protocol to the water. They talk about why they get a blessing from the water. So again, that would be another source for you. Maybe not necessarily that it has to be integrated, but our Indigenous students should be able to see themselves in a science lesson in your class as well. Do we recognize the importance of those? So Sacred Relationships is a really big site for you to go and visit too. So if you haven't ever been there, it's worth going. It's even worth going to learn as an adult your own background knowledge that they have in there. There's a number of links in here that we put in that you can generate materials from. I'm going to highlight Sparklebox, because if you are looking for some posters, if you're looking for some diagrams, all of that is free, and you can go in and Google what you need. So if you're looking for landforms, you could get mountains, you could get prairies. They will create those. They have those already created for you, so you can download them and just have them in the site, or give them to the students where they could go in and maybe that augments their presentation that they're going to be doing. So there's a number of different sites here that you would have access to and use. And there's also additional information that we used in seasons in the younger grades already. So again, if I need to do a little bit of review first in seasons, then maybe go to the end of the slide deck and grab something from the previous grades. You'll find it there. And you're also finding the changes in seasons. In grade 1, we offered them time-lapse photography to show them how in a whole year a changed location looks over the seasons. So in 40 seconds, they see an entire forest change for the whole year. So again, if children aren't clear on what we're talking about time over, how changes happens over time, you might want to use one of these as sort of your model or demo for them. And then you've got those already, so I'm going to skip this. Okay, the next time that we meet will be in that sort of 3rd week of November. That's where we will be doing our energy, and then that would be the end of that particular set. Have we got a link, Ted? Not quite yet.
In about 15 seconds.
All right, then give me 1 minute here, everyone. I'm going to go to the ARPDC site. And what I want to show you is the curriculum support documents. We already have them out for Living Systems. If you're not familiar with them, I want you to see what they are so that you know what's there, and that you will have them for matter, for Earth Systems, and for energy as well. So I'm on the arpdc.ab.ca site. This is kind of the storing house of all of the new curriculum materials that are being developed. If I go down to science in the toolbar at the top, I could select my grade if I wanted to, so I could go in and put grade 2 in. I suggest you do that because then you don't have to scroll through pages of what's been posted. It will narrow down everything that's been posted in grade 2. And what I'm looking for, here is a tab button that's already been created so that you don't have to look too far. Curriculum support document, if you click it on, it comes up below, right here. So this is the living systems for grade 2. If I want to see what it looks like, I just have to go into view resource. I'll pick up the document. You can download it and keep it on your computer, but it's available at any time. So in a nutshell, I'll run through this really quickly so that you know what you're looking for, and then you'll know what it looks like for the other ones when they come out. So this is for living systems. You get a brief intro of it. You will have an interactive table of contents. So if there's something that you're looking for in a particular cusp and you don't want to go through the whole document, you can click it on here and it'll take you to that place. In addition to that, there is a green bar that comes up at the top. Let me just bring it up here. This kind of houses all of your stop points of things that you need. So the very first thing is, if at the end you forget everything we just talked about when we do this, go to the first one that you encounter in the bar, and it's how do I read the document? So it's a quick video that will show you how to navigate through the document. The second one are all the hyperlinks to your progressions that you are required to still include in your lesson plans. The next one is the provincial recording that we made with you when we unpacked living systems. So this is a fast way for you to connect to it at the same time. Next to that, we have science planner and assessment planner. So when we did the pilot program, Ted had created a science planner and it was super well received by the teachers and they really liked it. So he created an assessment planner at the same time. If you're not familiar with it, all good. The third bullet here is him doing the video explaining how to use it, what's in it, where it's from. So again, you can download those. And below that is the concept map for living systems for grade 2. Next to that are the progressions. So we showed you that pink document that had the skills and procedures and the concept progressions. Those are those 2 documents. Again, you can download them and save them to your computer. And this is the numbered outcomes document as it appears right now. We will be building the verbs, the interactive verbs, into that as well. So this will be growing. Any of these numbered outcomes document that you see from math, science, any of them, we're putting dates in the bottom left-hand corner of the footer. So check the date. For example, in science, the last one that we did was August the 8th. If yours isn't dated August the 8th that you have on hand, you probably have an old version and it hasn't been updated with any of the corrections. So you might want to download a newer version. All right, so you have all of the information about the organizing idea. You have the learning outcome, the guiding question. You have an information piece about transfer. What does that mean? So just a quick summary about assessment. What does surface deep and transfer mean? And here are 2 sample summatives that you can use for living systems. Again, they're downloadable, editable. You can use them, not use them, look at them, get ideas, take parts of them, whatever. These are living documents. You see the watermark in the background. These will be added to hopefully on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. So you always have to check back and see what's new in there. You will have prerequisite skills, misconceptions, I know I can statement, vocabulary, and more importantly, the I understand for the cusp statement. Did they meet that understanding? Below that is kind of the meat of the matter that everybody seems to be looking for, and that is, here is my cusp. And you will see that it's already been broken out into knowledge and the skill and procedure that is more at a surface level. Those have already been divided out for you. So to the next part of that, the middle column, you have sample surface level activities. Some of them we showed you today. Lots of them that are in here are not a part of our presentation. So there's a ton more in here that you can use. So the same thing was true of living systems. These have been added to. How do I go through sample surface activities that link to that part of it? We also have infusion of Indigenous knowledge that will fit in there. Those are in progress, are actually going to come in here very quickly. And then what about excursions? Where do you live? Wherever all of you are living right now, could you go in living systems for a field trip that's close to your school? Can you send us where you went? And you might say, well, it's just going like across the street. People don't live here. But the point of that is a lot of your colleagues are looking for ideas and they're not even thinking in terms of what's across the street. So give us where you go for field trips in that organizing idea, and we'll add them to the list. So just to give people ideas about what they could be doing. Other resources that are specific to this CUSP, beside that are the links to your scientific method and computer science that are linked specifically to your grade for that organizing idea. And then over on the right-hand side are some surface level assessments, formative. So I want to do a quick double check. Do they really get it? And if they do, let's just see what they know. So those are assessments that you're welcome to use. Below that, the next row is now we're brought in the understanding and we brought in the skills and procedures. This is getting more into the deep side of it. What are some sample deep activities? What are some sample deep formatives that we can have, and so on. Below all of that for your CUSP are common resources that are going to show up every time that other school boards have already created that you have access to. You have Indigenous and general information websites that you can go to that are specific to your CUSP and or to your grade in general, not just Earth Systems, Living Systems. There's a lot of them, and there's lots of information there that you can glean and that you can use. As I go further down, I see a section called Primary Connections. So in the math sessions that or the math documents that we've released, we have NCETM. We partnered with the UK. The UK Ministry of Education allowed us to use their resources. This one is from Australia. And if you do see one that is connected to Primary Connections, I'll have given you a bit of a summary of what is in there that works for you. Click them on because they're a one-stop shop, lesson plan, videos, PowerPoints, activities, assessments. Like, they did a lot, and they are willing to share that with our teachers as well. Not everything will match to your CUSP, but most of it will. The same thing now happens with the second row of CUSP, the third row of CUSP, the fourth. It will just continue for every number of CUSPs that you have. The same kind of thing. Every one of these is a new activity. They're not the same one as the first one. So it's a pretty big document that covers grade 2 living systems in its entirety. It just goes through, gives you all that information that you can gather and use. At the very end of the document is a section called Literature Connections. If you're looking to grow your in-class library, if you're looking to do some books that link to what you're teaching, we've linked them to which CUSP it fits to. We even showed you if the book is available on YouTube as a read aloud. I also included in here whether it's an EPIC book. So instead of buying it, just Google it and you've got EPIC, which means EPIC is you have access to it as a teacher to read it in class with the students. Just bring it up on the screen. So there are a lot of books that are listed. You have the publisher, you have the descriptor, you have the name of the book, the author, and a bit of a description of the book. You could share this with your librarians. If they are looking to grow your resources in the library, they would probably welcome having these. If it says available from Pearson, the book came from the US, but Pearson will get it for us and sell it at a Canadian level. So I've already titled those, and some of those ones you're seeing sitting behind me are these books that Pearson sent us from the US, but Pearson Canada will look after getting them if you want to order them. So you don't have to go through the US. If it's an EPIC book, you'll see the word there. So that is what a curriculum support document is. There will be one for Earth Systems for grade 2. There'll be one for Matter for grade 2. There'll be one for Energy for grade 2. So it's our hope that these documents will give you enough support to help build your units, at least in the first year, and we'll keep adding to them. And if you as teachers give us information, we will add those in as well. So just send them to Ted and I. We'll be glad to post whatever we can put in there. And the more that we can kind of share out, the less work it is for each of you to do. So hopefully that gives you enough info today. I know we've gone over a little bit, but again, we wanted to share those documents so that you knew where they were, and they are going to be coming up. We won't be posting a big to-do saying, oh, they're out there. Just check the website, check your grade. If Living Systems is the only one there, if not, Matter will show up. If not, Earth Systems will show up. Okay, and Ted, I think, has put the link in for your slide deck. Are there any questions from anyone? Is there anything that we touched on that maybe we didn't touch enough on, or that you had questions and hoped to have answered and weren't answered?
Chris, I was just wondering if you could just post that link of that massive document. I tried to copy it, but I didn't quite.
Absolutely, I sure will.
So helpful. Thank you.
Okay, I'll throw it in the chat box for you. Okay, so grab that and by all means download it. And when the other ones are posted, keep them as well. But just know that they will be updated. And if you've not seen the ones for math yet, you need to go to the math and look at those ones because we have the same ones for math. So number for math grade 2 is completely posted already. All of your number is there. And we are very shortly going to be putting up stats and patterns. All of K-3 is finished. We're just in the process of posting. So just keep checking the website in math for the curriculum support documents and go grab them there as well. Are there any other questions? All right, well then we do wish you a wonderful Friday, that you have a weekend coming up. I know it was a short week, but I used to find as a teacher, sometimes those short weeks were longer. They felt longer. So I hope you have a wonderful weekend and we will see you again in November. If there is anything that comes up between now and November that you want to share with us, great. But if you have any questions, anything that you need from us, just email Ted or I and we'll be glad to try and help you out with whatever we have. Okay, so thanks very much, everyone.